So speaking about feeling scared for your health, we were just about to hit the record button and Steph received an email or a notification. Is that right, Steph?
Yeah, my email screen popped up that I had a new message. I'm still processing it.
Okay.
I haven't looked. I had blood work done yesterday because I had a physical last week, and they sent me, of course, to go get my blood work done. I'm about to vomit because the results came through. It says your test results are available, and I just have to click this little blue button that says view results, and I don't want to. I hate this.
Okay.
I don't want to, but I want to, but I don't want to. And I feel literally like my stomach's in my throat.
Yeah. Well, we just made a decision that we were going to talk about being scared for our health and as relates to eating. And then this email came through just as we were about to hit record. And Steph's gone a bit white. Is it, because if it was me in your position, I would have to know. If I knew that the information was there, I wouldn't be able to record a podcast with that going on in my head.
It's the opposite. It's like if I look, first of all, I have health anxiety, right? So I've been listening long enough, you might know that. And I've gotten so much better. Like I don't stress about things when it's not prompted anymore. So that's great. But when I have a result coming, like especially blood work, I know that I'm going to look at it and there'll be something there that is either high or too high for my liking, because I've got a lot of the orthorexia definitions in the back of my head, like where like, oh, they say that this is fine, but it should really be this, I've got all that in my head. And so I will take the opportunity to panic. And if I do that, I'm not going to be able to record. If that's in the back of my mind, I'm not going to be able to think straight. It will block my cognitive functioning and my executive functioning. And I will be talking from a place of distraction and fear, and I'll be much more pessimistic and I will not be helpful to people because I'll be in a bit of a flood.
Yeah. I think for me, the distraction would be in knowing the information was there and I can't, or I'm not looking at it right now. I think that to me would be more distracting than even having some unwanted news and recording a podcast. I don't know, because obviously it depends on what the news is.
Well, exactly. To me, I'm like, why would I will get upset inevitably. I will, unless it's great. Okay. But there's, I'm getting older. Things are changing in that body of mine. And here's what I won't do. I won't self-blame. And that's something that I used to do. So I when I was binging, I used to say, this is because I'm binging. This is because I don't eat the right things. I'm not good enough with my this or that. Especially when I'm binging, right? Because that was something so out of my control that it was like, oh, you jerk. Why do you binge then? Why do you do this to yourself? I would have taken the opportunity to like flagellate, but no, that's not it. I actually think that now I feel like sometimes these things are a lot less in my control, and that's scarier. Actually, I think that before it was like the invitation was to imagine I was controlling it and that somehow I could be controlling it better. But now I think that a lot of things, and especially working with clients who have recovered and sometimes their blood work comes back, especially like menopausal women whose cholesterol goes up, and that this is something that is very common in menopause that they don't talk about, but so many people are being like, oh, kind of taking the opportunity to blame themselves for how they eat or think that means they need to eat differently. And it's always about the food. But I can see very much that like some things just happen to our bodies. And here I am talking about that. And yeah, I'm afraid to look. But I think it's because I can see like that it's like maybe I don't have control. And that I don't like.
Yeah. I can remember the first time I went and had blood tests done. This was while I was still binging. And it said that my cholesterol was high. Mm-hmm. And so in my mind, I was like, well, there's only one reason why my cholesterol is high. And it's because of my binge eating. And I still think that that's quite possibly the case. And I remember at that time in my life, I used to do a lot of like spin classes, and I used to do harder exercise, if you like. And I remember, because this was sort of towards the end actually, when I was in a better place but still binging. And I remember going through a stage for quite a while where I didn't go to the gym and I didn't do spin, and the exercise I did was just yoga and walking. And I remember going back and having my blood test done maybe 2 years after this, and I was still barely binging, maybe sporadic binges at this point. And I remember my endocrinologist, she said to me, She goes, oh, your cholesterol's come down. She's like, whatever it is you're doing, she's like, keep doing it. She goes, but you do a lot of exercise, don't you? And I said, well, actually, I've stopped doing a lot of exercise. And that seems to have helped a lot in terms of bringing things down. So I think there's an interesting intersection here where there's a lot of talk about health at every size and how much weight is often blamed for health problems. What I don't hear spoken about so much in the health at every size community and rhetoric out there is the role of how we're eating or how that might impact our health as well. So I think people are feeling like, oh, it is, but how do I separate weight and my, dysregulation around food as which is the one that is causing problems? But then what? Even if we're saying, okay, binge eating is harming our health, then what? If it was that easy to just decide to, okay, I'm just going to stop now, then we would do it. So maybe even the first place to start is, why isn't fear for our health, the really strong desire that most people have to be the healthiest that they can, why isn't that enough?
Because it's not. You're just teasing me. I'm like, gosh, Sarah.
Hey, we're gonna be on the same page here. I'm just introducing the topic.
Answer that, Sarah. Wait, before I even answer that, can we talk about and I would like to just define, to be clear, because this is there's a lot of people, there's a lot of misconception about what health at every size means. And it doesn't mean that no matter what, you're healthy. It doesn't mean that everybody at any size everywhere is healthy. It's not that. And I've had clients and followers say that, like, kind of like, how could that even, I don't buy that. And I'm like, of course not, because that's not true. That's not what it's saying. It's just saying that it's not weight dependent. So if you are someone who lives in a larger body, you can have health, and that it's about behaviors and other factors and not related to your size. I also want to say that we very, very rarely think about how being very thin and being underweight is also not, like, we talk about the doubt on the side of being in a larger body, but we're never talking about how many people are underweight and how many people have disordered eating, and that is not productive for health in many cases. Do you think health at every size has a definition on Google? Probably,
but where Google takes that definition from might not be the most.
That's true, because it's not like
because it starts off like it as an ethos, and there's research behind it as well, and then people interpret it and look at it through different lenses as well. But I guess see what the top answer says.
There's really not a definition. I mean, this is where I can see myself that I go on tangent, off of tangent. But I also wanted to say that health is not, and Isabel Fox and Duke was the first person that I ever heard talk about this in a very specific way. It is not like you have health or you don't. It's not like a black and white issue. It's a spectrum. And I think there's multiple spectrums, right? Like you could have good health, quote unquote, from a cardiovascular lens, but not necessarily from, an endocrine lens or something like that, right? So health is on a spectrum anyway. And there's different variations of where health, and the difference between physical health and mental health, right? Like it's not black and white. But the definition as defined by the Association for Size, Diversity, and Health, ASDA, as I always picture saying it, it says, health exists on a continuum that varies with time and circumstance for each individual. Health should be conceived as a resource or capacity available to all, regardless of health condition or ability level, and not as an outcome or objective of living. And also to accept and respect the inherent diversity of body shapes, rejecting the idealizing or pathologizing of specific weights. So I think, some people are coming at this from talking about the respect angle, but I tend to think about it as, for example, I'm bigger than I was 5 years ago, 6 years ago. By all rights, I should be less healthy in the common narrative, right? At the diet culture narrative now. And that is not true. My thyroid numbers have improved. My heart numbers have improved. Like, the stabilization of my eating patterns has improved my health. And I think it's also the stress, right? So my stress levels are down, even though I still have anxiety and things like that. I think that I was just, all that I was always carrying around constantly had an impact, I believe. So it's not dependent on weight, right? Just because I gained weight and my BMI chart would indicate that I am less healthy, I am actually, by all measures, blood markers and self-report, I feel better. I've gotten off into the weeds because your original question was, What?
My original question was, why isn't the desire for health and the fear of poor health, why isn't that enough to change the way we eat?
Because that's logic. That's coming from the part of the brain that understands rationalization, and binge eating isn't in that spot. Like, to be very simplistic about it, it's just a different part. That's why you could also want to lose weight too. And that desire is very, very conscious and prevalent for many people. And still the binging takes place. And that's because the binging is completely not located in that part. It's not driven by that part of the brain. It's driven by your primal brain, which is acting in the moment only. It does not have future planning. It doesn't have like consequence understanding. It is just about protecting you here and now and acting here and now. This is where I think there's a huge, huge potential to reduce shame. This part of understanding for me was key to being like, oh, I'm not broken. It's a different part of my brain that's talking.
Yeah, and health is a long-term game as well. I mean, if we think what actually makes up health, and just talking about physical health here, you're looking at genetics, environment, and behavior. Am I missing anything? Maybe like psychological in there as well, because our psychology can affect our physical health as well.
Yeah.
So when we're looking at someone who's feeling like, I just want to feel healthier, and again, like I think I must have said this previously when we've talked about health on the podcast, but any one decision isn't going to make any difference to that. So in the moment when that urge and that desire is overwhelming to binge or to restrict or to just behave in ways around food that you know might not be the most health enhancing for you, it's not going to be a compelling reason, because any one decision doesn't make a difference. And certainly for me, it was always, well, tomorrow I'm going to sort it out. Like tomorrow, it's like not today, tomorrow. And it was that tomorrow thinking that I was just sort of kicking the stone down the street. But also it's because I was so focused on just behavior, which I couldn't change from my psychological and emotional perspective at that time, which is why I always end up swinging back to, this is our psychology, this is our emotions. But I also think that health promoting behaviors, I don't want to make this as a sweeping statement, but they can be, the difficulty doing it can be a real reflection or indication of how we feel about ourselves. So if we don't like ourselves, if we feel deficient, full of shame and all of that, why do we want to look after this person, this body, all these things about us that we hate? Is very different to when we can come alongside ourselves with tenderness and curiosity and compassion and all of those things. Because self-care, again, it's like self-parenting. It's having to do those things for ourselves that are not particularly fun to do. And when we get conflicted about that, that's when those things become even more challenging to do. And there's no conflict. We just do them.
I don't know about you, but health to me throughout my whole life, it was never delivered as self-care in the truest form of the word. It was always paired with diet culture. It was always paired with expectation and pressure and basically weight loss. So, and the reason I can feel this so much now is because I think that now I do engage in behaviors that would be called health promoting, and it comes from a different place, so I can feel the difference. It feels much more sincere. It feels more like taking care of myself for taking care of myself's sake. I also feel, to your point, more inclined to take care of myself now because I'm not riddled with shame, right? However, there is often, and I think this is a dominant thing going on, the association internally, subconsciously, of taking care of oneself and diet culture and the expectation of, the moral obligation to take care of yourself, wink, wink, to lose weight, is so strong that there is a rebellion against it. There's a fear of it and an anger towards it of like, no, I'm not going to do that. I should be taking care of myself. That's the conscious thought, but subconscious, it's like, yeah, and we know what that means. That means we have to go on a diet. It means we have to exercise no matter what every day, and we have to push ourselves through things that we don't really enjoy. We're not thinking about, well, why don't I walk out in nature every day? I should be taking care of my health. Nobody's beating themselves up for that. Or, well, maybe the walking part. But like there's so many other ways that health has been indicated that people aren't focusing on. It's always about health and it's always about food and exercise. And those are the two areas that diet culture has infiltrated. And so I think there is an association that creates a fear and a rebellion inside of these very concepts, because it's not health for health's sake. It's attached to other things. And because of that, I think that's why there can be this, sort of subconscious thing going on that's resisting it. It comes with conditions, and it comes with other expectations. And I think that a binge eater is very in touch with that and is very like, no, I'm not going to be compliant with that. But until that's deconstructed, I think it's really hard to want to take care of yourself in a sincere, in a what's the word? Not a sincere or authentic way, but I guess maybe authentic. It has to be health that resonates inside rather than the health that has been taught to us.
Mm. So just an example that might illustrate your point. So I knew I had a really packed day today. So I thought, I'm not going to be able to get out for a walk. I'm not really going to have much time to be moving around. I know I'm going to be sitting down and working most of the day. So last night before I go to bed, I'm like, right, I'm going to get on the yoga mat in the morning, and I'm going to do a longer practice, and I'm going to just do something that gets my blood pumping. So like a more strength-based practice. And I get up this morning and I'm on my period and I have period pain. And the last thing I feel like doing is pushing my body. So I have a moment where I'm like, well, I can just jack it off and go, okay, I'm just not going to do anything today. And then I thought, well, I could do a slower yoga practice, but I almost didn't want to be slow with the pain that I was in. And I was just feeling a bit fed up as well. But I had a moment where I was like, I need to do something for myself and for my body today. And I hadn't done this before, but I had it in my mind. I thought, oh, maybe I could just do some breath work. And so I found a little 15-minute YouTube video which went through all the different yoga breath work practices, like little short ones. And I sat down and I did that. And I got up again just feeling so calm. And my mind was just kind of going, thanks. Like, that's what we needed this morning. Where am I going with this? I guess I felt like that came from a really sincere place. It wasn't a case of like, oh, I really should do my yoga because that's what I do. And I'm messing something up if I don't. But I recognized that I needed something before this day that I know I'm going to be headfirst in my laptop all day. I needed something.
Right.
And that's not going to transform. It's going to make me physically stronger. It's not going to transform anything dramatically with my health. But it really did make me feel better physically.
Oh, physically. Because I was going to say,
and
was
mentally.
it? Yeah. There's a part of me that feels like the way into health. This is an incredibly sweeping statement, but I'll say it for myself. For me, the reason I think I am today able to access more health-related behaviors is because I put my mental health first. So mental health came at the beginning instead of the physical health. I went at it through that first. Because in a situation like that, I'm putting myself in that position 10 years ago. If I needed breath work or even the somatic work that I'll do, right? Sometimes somatically I will say like, yeah, that's what I need. It would be like, no, you need to go run. You need to go lose weight. Like that's the thing. Or you need to go get healthy through the physical body. It would not have been enough. Mental health wasn't worthy enough of a cause. So I wouldn't have been able to do those things. And I think doing those things and tending to my own mental health first has been a gateway into understanding why I would want to take care of myself. I don't think it could have happened the other way around. Another point of that is I remember realizing for the first time that exercise, I think I've talked about this before, exercise actually doesn't help me lose any weight. It actually I think I actually gain some, a little bit, because I think that I just get hungrier. And I remember the first time that I really realized that and I was like, and I still want to do it. You know what I mean? And I remember feeling that way and being like, what? Who are you? You know, and that's where I was kind of like, wow, my priorities have changed, where I really value the way that exercise makes me feel. And I will do that even if that means I'm a few pounds more than I would be if I didn't. Because actually the smallest I ever have been in my adult life, I wasn't exercising at all. It was also, there were other factors, but I wasn't. And I choose to do it all the time, and I would still choose to do it. And a question that I think we've also talked about, that I'll often ask clients is, if you knew that this would not help you lose weight, would you do it anyway? whatever that health behavior is?
It's a provocative question. And for me, actually, the way in, I think, for being able to pursue more health promoting behaviors was to lower the bar. Because for me, I was so all or nothing about it. Unless it's going to get my heart rate up and I'm going to be sweating by the end of it and all of that, what's the point? I mean, the idea of a 20-minute walk, I'd be like, I just, why? Why on earth would I do that?
Yeah.
And now I feel the difference from having sat on my computer. If I were to get up and walk for 20 minutes, I'd feel better for that, because it's just that moving and uncrumpling of my body. And of course, it started with the 5 minutes of yoga every day, which I did for several years. But I realized that one of my biggest blocks was this sense that I was inconsistent. And the reason why I was inconsistent was because of these black and white and unreasonable expectations I had of myself. When I lowered them right down and began to derive a sense of satisfaction just from doing small things, like rather than being the outcome of how much I've done, the fact that I'd done something. And that's what I'm feeling today, actually. It's the fact that I did something for myself this morning. I recognize, no, that thing that I planned to do, I really don't want to do it. And I really don't think it's going to make me feel better the way my body's feeling today. And I did something. I just brought the bar right down. I was like, well, I'm just going to do this thing here. So it wasn't even just that I felt better physically and emotionally for doing it, because it honestly feels like a trait of mine that has really managed to shift through doing this.
That's, again, to me, that's more related to mental health, right? Like there's something about the way, are you saying that the way it makes you feel about yourself to do something that was previously inaccessible to you, or like?
Yes. Yeah. But we're talking about how do we get to physical behaviors. I think it's what a lot of people are interested in. Because they're like, oh yeah, well, self-compassion, all that is all very well. But how does that actually end up improving my physical health?
Yeah. It's slower. This is less fancy and slower. And to your point, it feels like, what's the point? Like you don't get the big hit. And that's why I think it's less compelling and we don't give it as much credit. But I do want to get back to what you said earlier, because I think this is a big one of why would I want to take care of myself? This association of feeling shame, feeling badly about ourselves, feeling in the black hole, and the behaviors that go along with that. I even think about that with hygiene. The worse I felt about myself, the less I wanted to shower and the less I would take care of myself, even in basic ways. I mean, I wouldn't brush my teeth, like just ways in which I just was like, I don't even care. I don't even care about myself. I'm in such a, and I think health behaviors are part of that, right? So what is that? What is that about, where we, again, the question might come of like, why, when I'm at my lowest, would I not want to help myself? Do I just hate myself? Why am I so insistent on my own self-punishment? Again, I think that makes sense. I don't think that's actually weird. Like, it makes sense to me. But I think it can be confusing.
Well, it comes down to shame. And the idea of shame is that belief that we're not who we think we should be. And I just remember that it was so scary to me. It was so frightening to think what I was doing to myself, how it was impacting my physical health, my mental health, and most scarily, the fact that I felt like I just couldn't put the brakes on at all. I couldn't stop. And I just felt like I was constantly failing. And that story just gets reiterated round and round. So like, it's that idea that we can't understand why we can't do this thing that we're saying we want, that we really want, that we know would make life better and easier for us, or we believe it will anyway. We can't understand why we can't, even though we keep promising ourselves that we will. So the brain's like, yep, you're just broken. You're just the kind of person who can't do this. You're this, you're that. And when that story gets activated and we believe that story, then our behavior follows the story we have about ourselves. So until we break that story and have compassion for, yes, we're stuck. Yes, it's scary. Yes, we seem to be behaving in ways that are really self-destructive. If we make the conclusion for that we're broken, as opposed to we are lost, we're caught up in something and in primal drives that are dysregulated and things that are bigger than us, for as long as we think we should be able to control the things that actually we can't, we're just going to get stuck in this fight with these really, really powerful forces.
I'm sitting here listening to you being like, oh, Sarah, we're so good. Because I feel like there's so many, I'm going to take that out, but there's so many, why not? Why can't we toot our own? there's so many ways of answering this question, and they're all relevant, right? It's not like there's one right answer to this, because in the back of my mind, I'm like, I have two answers. I have two things. And here you are with like another thing. I'm like, that's so good too. There's so many opportunities to understand ourselves in these different ways. Can I offer my two?
Please do.
Two things. One, so the other thing I think is that the brain loves black and white thinking. And again, not a character flaw. I think it's just easier for the brain. So where we are feeling like I'm binging every day this week, or I'm gaining weight, that pull into the black or the white is easier to have all the behaviors follow that. How uncomfortable is it to be like, to feel so badly about yourself in one regard, and then it's almost cognitive dissonance to then be taking care of yourself over here. But in the taking care of yourself, there is also then the expectation that then we have to go on that side of the pendulum, right? That it's like, well, if I go out and, go for a walk today, that means I also have to eat really well today. And it's like that clean slate syndrome. And I think, how often is our brain saying, well, if you do that thing, you have to do all the things on that side, right? Like, it doesn't like the messy middle, or like the incongruence of, I feel shame about these things, but I'm also taking care of. It's just messy. I think it's very hard for the brain to conceptualize this. I think gray area thinking is hard. So that's one thing I think that can happen. And the other thing is that I think oftentimes when we are in a place of a low, where we're not taking care of ourselves, or we're eating a lot, or we're often in a freeze. And so because we're in a freeze, that's why those behaviors are starting to happen. And then we're shaming ourselves further for that. And that's creating more of a freeze, because the second we hear all that, the fingers wagging at us, that's more stress. And then we're like, I'm going to freeze harder. And then in a freeze, you don't have the energy. And I think the respective understanding, like when we're in that place, it's not because you don't want to, it's because you don't have the energy to. You can't even, like, getting in the shower, I remember for me, took so much mental energy, not even just the physical energy. It took that too. But the mental energy involved was like, I don't have it. I don't have it. And then you're sitting there like, are you kidding me? Like, you're not getting in the shower. And then you're like, then you really don't have it. And I think that to understand the freeze response when we're particularly low and in shame is again, a sciencey way in. For me, it's again, a way that I offer myself compassion, because I'm like, this isn't my character. This is the state of my nervous system right now. And I need to respect that, even if I'm frustrated about that, or I at least understand it from that, from the lens of that, rather than it being my fault, or, or a permanent condition that I'm in. So I like to offer those as well.
And bouncing off of that, I think it's very similar. I'm not quite sure if it's quite the same as that. It could certainly overlap. But just thinking back myself, and because I was in so much shame, I just couldn't bear to be with that. And there's something about when we're looking after our bodies exist in the here and now space-time continuum, right? So any kind of like health promoting thing that involves looking after our body involves us acknowledging the present moment, where we are, what's actually happening, and all of that. There's something about coming into and looking at now. And I wanted to be anywhere but now.
Yeah.
I didn't even want to be in the future or the past, because
Right.
I wasn't convinced that either of those were any good. I just wanted to be out of here, like on another planet, preferably. And that made it really difficult. And that was a big part of, like, even when I was no longer pursuing weight loss, that was the function that binging did for me. It was like, I just feel so uncomfortable with myself right now. I'm so disappointed that my body is in, quote unquote, the state that it is in, been how I would have thought about it at the time. And to be with that and acknowledge that, because I think as well, especially if you're in a place where you feel like your health is suffering, so you're trying to make your health physically better than you currently are, it kind of involves going into the suffering and accepting that first, because it's like we need to accept where we are in order to take the next step. And instead it's like, I don't want to accept where I am, I just want to already be on the next step. But we need to come to where we are to be able to take any steps anyway.
Yes. This is a great segue into what I want to talk about in this episode, around the difference between urgency of health and I don't know what the opposite of that is. But you know how sometimes you can feel like, I'm eating like mad. I can't stop having sugar. I hear this, right? I'm gaining weight and my body's bigger than it has ever been. And my doctor's on me, these things. That is fearful, right? There's a lot of fear in that. And because of that fear, that can again turn on the part of the brain that's like, we're in danger right now. Get us out. And that, I think, creates that sense of either like panic or a freeze of I'm either checking out because no one can help me. And all the podcasts I listen to, like, still don't get me anywhere. Like, I'm just afraid. I'm so afraid. And I think the decisions that come from that place, I think it's really helpful to know when decisions are coming from and when that feeling is coming from that place, because there's a difference between the panic and urgency of health fears and desires to become more healthy versus a whole brain thinking on it and a present moment calm brain, right? So it is one thing to say, and I'll speak for myself. There was a time when I was like, I wanted to crash diet or go. I know that I would have wanted to go on Ozempic, and I'm not judging anyone who chooses to do that, but I know that that would have been my absolute fastest route. Like, I just got to get out of here, and I need help right now, and that's what I'm doing. Or I'm going to start intermittent fasting. By God, I'm just going to do it. Like, it would have been these extreme measures to respond to the extreme urgency. Whereas I think if I were in this situation now where I felt my health were, for example, if I open this email and I see something that calls for attention, I tell you right now, have a bit of time, probably a 24-hour period of urgency and flooding. But I know it, so I will wait, but I'll have it. I will enter it because I'm going to get afraid. I'll pause long enough to let it pass. And after about 24 hours, I think I will be able to come back to it and be like, okay, this number is not where I'd like it to be. How do I want to think about? How do I think about that? Like, is this something that is a controllable? Is this a high cholesterol number that might be indicative of me entering perimenopause, which I don't think I am yet, but let's say. Is this something that's genetically relevant? Is this something that I do think I can do something about? And if so, what would I like to do? And how much control over that do I really have? And how do I do that in a way that is sustainable for me? And how do I react to that? I know that at a certain point, I had invited myself to start having chia seeds again in my recovery, which was an orthorexic food that I used to have and make myself have a lot. And I remember thinking, I know they have good omega-3s in them. And I started to have them again. This is around gentle nutrition time for me. And there was some fear in my body. There was some like, are we going to go there again? And I kind of had to regulate myself through that and be like, no, we're not. I will not be putting them in every single thing I eat and trying to hide them and make, I'm not going to be having chia eggs anymore. But I can put them in my chia eggs. Yeah, you make little, yeah, I'm not even going to go into it. I would just, yeah, they were like shots of chia. Anyway, I will now I'll sprinkle them in my oatmeal because I like them in there and that's fine for me. But I'm going to keep myself in the middle about this. That kind of being able to address things from the calm brain, from a moderate brain, not from like an urgent panic, do the big things, do them all, do them now, is so much more helpful to our health. It's actually, I think that that's more likely to impact it than the urgent panic. So why did I start talking about this?
Well, you were talking about making decisions from a place of fear.
Yeah, right. So I think that oftentimes what happens is that health and fear are so linked. You scroll your phone right now and you'll find headline after, you'll find all the articles telling you, if you're not eating these 5 things, you're going to cut 10 years off your life. There's so much fear mongering in health, and that isn't healthy. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's directly propagating what we're trying to get away from. It's increasing our stress around it. And stress is one of the biggest health determinants. That's inarguable at this point. And yet we pay very little attention to that, or we are so much quicker to address it through, I need to cut back on my food and sugar and go start exercising every day. We're going to do that so much faster than we're going to even think about, I need to calm myself. I need to regulate my body and my mind. That I would argue has at least an equivalent, if not more, greater impact on health than all the rest of what we think it's about.
I'm just genuinely curious. What happens then? What do you think the function of those 24 hours are for you? You were saying if you opened your blood test results and there was a number that was out or something,
Yep.
that you're going to go into a 24 hours of something somatic going on. And you also knew how you'd come out of it.
Yeah.
So I think for those of us who don't have that pattern or don't understand that pattern, maybe if they do have it, it's like, if you know where you're going to end up, what is the function? Like, what is that 24 hours? Is there any way of getting...
No, it's the adrenaline and cortisol that get released in the sympathetic state. So it's when we have stress as humans, right? My go-to is fight or flight. So I will be like, fight. I saw a meme yesterday. It was so funny. It was like, anxiety, get ready to fight. Me, why? Anxiety, just get ready. Me, why? What's going on? Anxiety, just get ready. It's like that's exactly true for me. Like my body's like, anything remotely threatening, I get rallied, right? And that my cortisol rises, my adrenaline goes up, and that's the flooding. It's this get prepared, and it's truly giving me the energy of fighting or running. That needs biologically time to come down because those hormones, those things come up and then they come down. So I need to wait for that it's a biological process in me. I don't know if it exists for everybody. I think it's supposed to. I think maybe some people bypass it and go right into freeze, or maybe some people regulate faster than me. But this is for me the way that my body responds, and I know it, and it's it's just kind of, I just have to wait it out.
Interesting. I mean, just going back to what you were saying about making decisions from that fear place. When I've seen somebody get a health scare and they've gone straight into right, I've got to do this, I've got to do that. And you can see the tension. It's coming from this tense, fear-based place. It's like what you're describing there. When the fear kind of comes down again, where are you left at? If you are using that cortisol, that adrenaline, that kind of biological response to drive a new behavior change, it's like at some point those run out, right? And then the power behind the fuel in the tank, if you like, has run out, and you're going to come to a stop.
Yeah.
And I found it really helpful, and it took me a while to get there, to notice that, what's my state when I'm making this big decision about anything, whether it's about a relationship or a difficult conversation, or whether it was about food or health or whatever it might be. If I'm saying to myself, right, I'm going to start doing this different thing, what's the energy behind that? Because only when I come to a grounded place where it feels like it comes from me, is there any hope for me to get some kind of consistency. I'm thinking as well, just in sort of forming new habits, because I caught myself before I moved into this flat here that I'm in now, where I'm going to be for a little while. And I've been going place to place. Been very much out of my routine. So sometimes I haven't done my meditation practice like I normally would, or I haven't done my yoga. So all my routines has just been a bit out. And I noticed myself going right, when I get into my new place, and it came from this stress place that I hadn't been doing it. When I get to my new place, right, I'm gonna do extra this, I'm gonna do extra that. And I was ramping it up from where I already was. I was ramping it up to this longer, bigger miracle morning kind of routine thing. And I caught it, and I'm like, you are trying to decide what you're going to do in a couple of weeks in a state of stress because you're feeling the stress now.
Yeah.
And when I noticed that, I was like, just get there. Just get there, see what kind of state you're in, and then decide what it is that you might need. Not 100% sure how this fits into what we were talking about, but there's some threads.
Well, no, yeah. It's like wading through it's knowing yourself. It's understanding what you're going through when that fear comes upon you. And instead of taking it at face value as believing in the urgency, it's understanding why it's there and understanding that's part of the reaction state. And you can, this is what I talk about with flooding and body image work as well. Like the reaction of seeing yourself in a photo or in the mirror. Same thing happens, right? The fear, oh no, it's that threat we have a response to that. And I think it's really helpful to understand that isn't, that urgency is just urgency. It's not the message. We buy in. Of course we do. That's what we're designed to do. We're designed to act in that space. It's it's hard. And I think we have to practice being like, oh, right, that's something telling me that something's very important that I act right now. I know though, and this is part where your executive functioning comes in, or there's got to be some kind of, oh, right, I'm in that state. wait for it so that your whole brain can come back online. I think it's just the value of understanding the process and seeing how that works so that you're not making the plans to do this thing that you're not going to have the stamp, that energy is going to run out.
Yeah, I think I noticed as well, oh, this is black and white thinking. This is that thing I used to do where I set my expectations up here, that I'm down here at 3 or 4, and I'm telling myself that when these circumstances change, I'm just going to start operating at a 10.
Yeah.
And then I would feel like I'd failed. And then I would just,
Right.
it would just throw everything off. And I guess I caught myself doing that. And when I caught myself doing that, there was a bit of disappointment because I realized that actually, no, you're probably not going to be like that. You're not going to suddenly feel inspired to write a book just because you're in a different environment. And
I know. Yeah, it can work both ways. It can be helpful. This knowledge is helpful because you're like, all right, I don't have to take it seriously and panic. But also, I'm also not going to. Yeah, we have to. It's like a bit humbling.
Yeah.
Do you know the Rosetto study?
It's ringing a bell, but go on.
The village in eastern Pennsylvania, where they found that there was a community of people who had like remarkably low mortality rates and no cardiovascular events, like in this community of people, and they studied them and tried to figure out why and what they were eating and how much they were exercising and why they remained so healthy. And like healthy as in long life and thriving up until death.
What was the conclusion?
Well, I'm going to read you a little bit of this article because I love this study. It says, during the 1950s, drugs to lower cholesterol levels were neither popular nor readily available. Heart diseases were spreading in the U.S. like an epidemic. Researchers arrived in Rosetto. This is the town where these people were. Rosetto had nearly no heart attacks for the otherwise high-risk group of men. Men over 65 had a death rate of 1%, while the national average was twice that. So they started calling this the Rosetto effect. When compared to the lifespans and health conditions of those in neighboring towns, Rosettans were somewhere around half as likely to be stricken with things like heart attacks, hypertension, and strokes. Simply put, the residents of the town only died of old age. Okay. The researchers looked for their diets, blah, blah, blah. They found that they cooked with lard. They loved pasta and wine. They feasted on sausages. 41% of their calories came from fat. They smoked the occasional cigar. To summarize, their diet was nowhere near being a healthy diet. They did not follow any exercise routine either. Moreover, many of them had overweight and obesity problems. I mean, they say it like that. Finally, after a long stay in Rosetto, Wolf and sociologist John Brunn solved the mystery of the Rosettans. Rather than genetics, diet, or geography, the social structure and culture of the Rosettans were the core reason for their long and happy lives. They lived in close-knit communities. They loved each other and took every opportunity to engage as a community. The elderly were naturally less stressed, as there was always someone looking out for them because of the cordial relationships. Stress levels were so low that they were practically off the charts in a good way, and lifespans reflected that unique comfort level. It became a phenomenon referred to as the Rosetto effect, by which a close-knit community, reduced rate of heart disease, and extended lifespan. Going back to the stress model and how the impact of community lowers stress, and that has, I mean, it's just a little town, and it's, you got to take it with a grain of salt, but also I really believe it.
Yeah. So if you are seeking out a community, we have one. Check out the links below. Your health depends on it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Oh, good segue out.
I think so.
Did I look at my test results?
Yeah, go for it. I want to know.
No, I'm not going to do it.
No. Okay.
No.
Oh, you tease.
I was gonna, and then I was like, no.
I've got to record another episode, so maybe after that.
Yeah. Okay, fine.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks, dear listener, for joining us today.
That's right. Thanks, dear listener.
See you next time.
Thanks to you, dear Sarah. Okay, bye.